Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Made Possible by Pop Culture, the podcast that looks at influential pieces of past and present pop culture. To help me do that on this episode, my guest today is Lamar Johnson. He's the Emmy nominee you know from The Hate You Give, All the Bright Places, Your Honor, The Last of Us, The Wilderness, Brother, and now The Abandons, which just dropped on Netflix. I want to say upfront that we will be talking about his arc on The Abandons, so if you haven't checked it out yet, be warned of potential spoilers ahead. But I hope that you'll want to check it out after this conversation. Or you could always pause the episode right here, go watch the 7 episodes because they do go by fast, and then come back. So, anyway, we're going to talk about Lamar's past influence of dance, which helped him launch his career in a way. And then, of course, we'll talk about what's influential for him now, including getting into those spoilers for The Abandons. So, first and foremost, of course, Lamar, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So how are things now? I mean, you had like a very busy, it seems like few years. I mean, I know with the
Yeah.
Abandons, it started all pre-strikes, and then
Yeah, it
obviously
did.
you weren't shooting until after the strikes. But like, does it feel good now that you have all of this stuff out in the world, or are you maybe just as busy working on things that we don't know about yet?
Yeah, I mean, it feels really good for it to finally come out. I feel like we've spent so much time, we are in Calgary for 7 months shooting the
Mm.
show. So, that's a big chunk of the year and the time. And also, like you said, pre-strike. So we were attached to shoot this project a year prior to us actually shooting it just because of the strikes and everything that had happened. So it kind of pushed everything. So, the abandons in the entire world have sort of been sitting on it and sort of percolating for the past 2 years. So it's really great for it to finally come out.
Yeah. So we will
Yeah.
get into that. I do want to obviously talk about your role as Albert Mason and like what you had to do in this like very gritty, for those who haven't seen it yet, 1850s kind
Yeah.
of mob in a way world.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do like to start these conversations with the past so that we can let
Okay.
our listeners and our viewers know more about you and kind of sometimes maybe even what led you into where you are today.
Right.
And I know
Right.
you wanted to talk about dance. And I know at
Yes.
the start of this, I said that maybe it helped launch your career in a way. And I was thinking of honestly next step when I said that.
Yes.
And like I know
Yeah.
those dance camp videos still exist out there. I got to watch some
Yeah. All over
before we
YouTube.
talked.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking of too, in terms of like dance being so influential, like it became a part of your career, or was it more influential on you when you were younger as like an escape, an art form, something for fun?
Well, actually, it was a bit more of the latter, actually. I mean, I started dancing really, really young. I think I was maybe like 8 years old, dancing in a friend's basement, and I kind of started in a talent show. And then, my first real kind of taste of being on set through dance was in the movie Honey with Jessica Alba.
Yep.
And, that experience and kind of being on set, I didn't know that in that moment that was sort of a seed that was planted for me. Like, hey, I love this environment. This is where I want to be. But then it kind of took me and I fully committed to this dance career. I performed at the Apollo Theater when I was 11 years old. I did a lot of like really cool, amazing stuff, opened up for Chris Brown. So dance really was just my foundation in terms of just creativity and like what you said, an outlet for me, which then led me to then go to an art school, went to an
Okay.
art school, fell in love with acting. I was in the theater program. Through the theater program, then I transitioned to film and television, and then through film and television, then we're where we are today. So it was a full process of really just finding myself through
Yeah.
performance, through movement, through dance. And, with the love of that, I was able to sort of, evolve that into a craft of acting.
So let me back up then, because when you're starting and it is just maybe for fun and you're 8 years old, what type of dance are you starting? And is this, I feel like, I mean, you said you went to an art school, but I feel like I've also heard you say you were self-taught in the earlier years.
Yes,
So I'm
yes.
curious what you were using in those early years to teach yourself, if there were people or projects or anything really,
Yeah.
the music that you were like, this is where I'm starting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my of course Michael Jackson was a very big influential figure for me, growing up and watching him and just seeing, just the icon that he is, and the influence that he had. It was big on me, so that was a big one. Also, just growing up, movies like You Got Served was a really, really cool movie. And also even Honey, the movie that I was in, I
Well, I
sat
was gonna
down
say
and
that
watched
comes
the,
after because you
yeah,
were in it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I watched that movie and I got influenced and I was very blown away just by the entire experience of it. And the fact that I was in it was incredible to me as a 9-year-old. It was like, wow, I'm in this thing with Jessica Alba and Genuine and Missy Elliott, and like there's so many amazing artists in that movie. Um, and yeah, like Step Up, things like that. But yeah, I mean, it was really just influenced by so growing up, there was a lot of dance competitions that would
Okay.
happen. And I was really big in the dance competition. I was in like a dance crew and we perform and compete at these dance competitions. So just through having that experience, I was able to just kind of pick
Mm,
different styles and vibes and things from other people. I was really into gymnastics. So I was doing back flips, front flips, side flips, and all of this kind of background, it fed into my experience in the next step because the next step was sort of that beautiful bridge for me where I could sort of bring my dance, which
mm,
is like my first passion, with acting and the new sort of performance aspect that I can now kind of marry the two and sort of
right.
have this platform that I can just exist as myself, right? And it was really beautiful to be able to do that.
And it feels like, I mean, all of the things that you're talking about, like it's obviously a little bit beyond dance when you're incorporating gymnastics and flips and things like that.
Yeah,
It's a little bit
yeah,
more physical.
right.
Um, at what point do you feel like you realized that was really what you were interested in doing and not something that's maybe a little bit more restrictive? Like ballet to me feels, where I grew up, everybody, and it's also when I grew up, but like that
Yeah,
age and the place, everybody who had a little girl threw them into like ballet when they were like 3 or 4. And but
yeah,
it always felt to me like it's very old school the way that they were teaching it, and it's very specific, technical, sure, but also
yeah,
like there wasn't a lot of freedom of expression. And I think
yeah, of
the
course.
way that you're talking about, you seem to have had more of. So I'm curious at what point maybe you said like, maybe I do like the technical aspect of certain styles, but I
Yeah.
also really love being able to do more.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I mean, I started off as a freestyle hip hop dancer, right? So
Yeah.
it
So
was
it's
mainly
different.
hip hop. It was mainly just movement and isolations and waving and popping and doing that sort of thing, That was really my world. But I think being on the next step, getting exposed to so many different styles of dance, it really wanted me to raise the bar
Mm,
and raise the level for myself, right? Because I was just in that hip hop world. Of course, a lot of the movement that I was doing was very fluid, and I guess it was reminiscent of maybe contemporary, let's say, but I really wanted to really hone in on the technical aspect of my dance and of my craft. I wanted to sort of round myself. So,
yeah.
I trained in ballet. I trained at the Canadian Dance company for like a year and a half. I competed with them. I was in classes maybe 3 times a week. I was doing ballet privates. I was really locked in and taking the craft very seriously. Just because that was the space that I was in, especially with the next step, we're really incorporating so many different styles, and I wanted
Right.
to become proficient at whatever style it was that was thrown at me. Even though I was the hip hop dancer, I still wanted to be able to hold my own when we're
Mm.
doing, partner work, or if we're doing some contemporary that requires a bit more of a technical ability or skill. Yeah, I always want to try and challenge myself with everything that I'm doing. So, dance sort of allowed me to evolve that craft and that sort of even bleeds into my craft of acting and wanting to challenge myself, with roles. And yeah, and I always wanted to sort of just give my best and allow myself to step over something like with the abandons. Riding a horse was something that I never would have thought that I would be doing,
Sure.
but it was a challenge for me, and that was really intriguing. Also, with me playing a character, Albert, who is of color
Mhm.
existing in this time, which we don't rarely get to see. So I
Yeah.
think also even just that, and also the fact that he was a free man, he's a free black man, educated, came from a lineage of educators. That for me and that entire foundation and backstory really, really was very intriguing to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too to bring up the horse because when I was thinking of like physicality and then how that might transfer to acting roles, I didn't necessarily think about horseback riding as one example.
Yeah,
But now that you've said it, I see it. I see the
yeah,
connection of like you have to be in control of your body because you have to
yeah.
be not fearful of this horse, but you
Right.
also have to be like limber enough to get yourself up there and
Yes, of
be
course,
comfortable riding.
for sure.
Before you got to this point though, when working on films like Honey when you were so young, did you feel like there was going to be a path that was mostly dancing in film, like acting roles that also required dancing, or did you already start to say, even that young, this is just one thing that I'm doing and I want to use it for certain things, but then I want to
Yeah.
be able to show my range? At what point, I
Right.
think,
Yeah,
if you
really.
know what I'm asking.
Yeah, really, really great question. Honestly, I think at that young age, I didn't necessarily have the scope.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I mean, I
or,
heard what I
to
said.
know
I
like,
was like
hey,
nine
yeah,
years old,
exactly.
maybe
Like,
not.
oh, like this is gonna take me here, But I think it really just came from passion. I was a very passionate young boy. I loved dance. I loved the way that it made me feel. I
Mm,
loved the way that it connected people and it created this communal energy, especially with the people that I was dancing with. They became my brothers and sisters, and it was really, really beautiful that way. So it was an outlet for me, you
hmm.
know. As a young kid growing up in Scarborough in Toronto. So like yeah, it was a really beautiful outlet. I didn't necessarily have that sort of, I guess maybe the foresight or the vision to know like this dance or me having this experience was the seed that was planted for me to know like, oh, I'm gonna be on set,
Mm,
but not as a dancer, as an actor, performing, being the one that's on the screen saying the lines and things like that. But there was a time where I did like quit dance for a little bit, and this was prior to the next step.
okay.
Because I was so athletic, because I was doing gymnastics and all these different things, I really took a liking to basketball. And I was playing basketball, rep basketball for about 2 years. And I remember there was a phone call that I got from a friend of mine, and he called me and he's like, "Hey Lamar, it's been a while. What are you up to?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm playing basketball." And he's like, "Basketball?" It's like, man, listen, you're too talented to play basketball. Like you have like yeah, he's like you have so much more to
Oh,
give.
because I was like, I mean, being able to play basketball is also a talent. So
No,
that's
of
why I'm
course,
like,
but
wait a
what he
minute.
meant is he knew my background and where I was coming from in terms of dance and the potential of
Sure.
that, or not even just dance, the potential of dance through storytelling,
Yeah.
and just having more to give in the way of performance, in the way of telling stories. Like there's so many different mediums and routes and avenues that could have taken my creativity. Of course, there's a level of creativity in basketball, but it comes from a different place than dance and performance, right? It's more of like a physical sport. And of course, basketball is incredible. I love basketball still to this day, but I do appreciate that call because he was the one that introduced me to the art school.
Oh, wow.
So then I auditioned for the art school and it changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that call. Not to say, and it didn't come from a place of him kind of like tearing down my
No,
dreams,
yeah.
my goals or anything like that. It came from a place of love. Someone that I've known for a very, very, very long time, calling me, checking in, just seeing what I'm doing and yeah, and wanting kind of to push me
Mm.
into that path, and that path led me down to this road where we are today. So I think it was a process for me to get to the place where I kind of knew what my direction was. But once I started acting and I got into the theater program, I knew that was what I felt I was called to do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I was struck a lot by what you were saying earlier about like the family that could be created via
Yeah,
dance. Because
yeah,
we hear it all the time, and honestly, sometimes I roll my eyes at it. But like the family that is created sometimes on set
yeah,
as well,
yeah,
and so like
yeah,
that to me
absolutely.
does feel like okay, maybe family is not always the right word, but certainly a sense of community.
Yes,
Just the way that you have to all strive towards this artistic goal
yeah,
together,
right.
work
Yep.
together to find it. I want to talk a little bit about that actually looking at the abandoned specifically
Yeah,
because it's such an interesting group of actors in the way that they position you in the story. So, for those people who haven't seen it yet, again, we're going to get into spoilers, but it's basically, I mean, the story starts with kind of like a war between these two families that are led by women, which, first of all, I was very intrigued by because you usually see these stories from the male perspective.
Right.
And so it was interesting, I think, right away that we're really following like the matriarchs doing the bad things to each other
Yeah.
and to the town.
Yeah.
But you mentioned this earlier, being your character, Albert, being a free person of color at this time, and not just being a free person of color, but a second generation. That to me
Yes.
was so interesting. And I felt
Yes.
like there's so many things you can do with him and like his lineage and the people
Absolutely.
around him. And I'm
Yeah.
curious how that was brought to you in the beginning, because
Yeah.
obviously, like we said, it did take a while to actually come
Yes.
together
To
because
get
of the
there.
strikes and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering like how it was brought to you in the beginning and then how maybe it changed or evolved over time as you were working on it, especially because there are so many characters to service in the story.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, being a part of like an ensemble is yeah, is interesting, and especially when, the creative of the show is ever changing and ever evolving and ever growing as the process is happening, right? So, when I first signed on, of course I knew about this backstory of this character and sort of just being intrigued to tell his story and
Hmm.
get into who he is and the relationship that he has even with Lena's character, like when did they meet? Like what's
Right.
the backstory there? What's the connection and the dynamic within the family that I felt was so very interesting because we are all orphans, because we're all, like we're this kind of band of these outsiders that all come together that create this sort of multicultural, come from different places, this family. And I felt like that was very intriguing to me, but of course the creative and the scripts weren't all put together and weren't done yet, so it was really just off the strength of the potential. And as the show progressed, of course it's an ensemble and there's many different stories that they had to serve and some things that there's a lot of creative changes that were made throughout the process. But nonetheless, I'm extremely grateful to be part of the show and also just to have the connection that I was able to build with Lena and with my family,
Hmm.
with Ned, with Natalia, with Diana. It was a really beautiful thing. And like we were talking about with family, we really built a very beautiful bond, even off set. We still hang out, we still connect, and it's a really beautiful thing.
So, did you have the first episode at least when you were
Yes, the
saying yes?
pilot.
Okay.
Yes,
Because
yes,
the reason I'm asking is because the confrontation scene in the pilot, again, spoiler alert for everybody, but there to me, there's such an interesting dynamic at play of like your character potentially going to be the one to shoot the guy who is assaulting your sister, who is this rich
right.
white man. And like
Yeah,
we all, as viewers, know how bad that would go for you,
of
as
course.
even a
Yeah, of
free man,
course.
but a
Yeah,
black
of course.
man in the
Yeah,
1850s.
yeah,
And then that's not what happens. And
yeah.
so there's like, I don't know if you felt this, but I kind of felt this little like collective sigh of relief that that's not where the story was going to
Where
take
it went. Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't want to watch like trauma. I wanted
Yes,
to
of
watch your
course.
character do something good. And
Yeah,
I'm
of
curious how
course.
that affected you as a performer, knowing that going into the story, if that made you feel a certain way about taking the role, knowing like, I'm not saying there's no trauma in this story, but
Yeah.
it's not to the level that maybe we thought it would be.
Yeah, of course. And I think the pilot was a big draw for me as well, reading the pilot and also just seeing, just how capable these people were. I think that for me was a big draw. I was like, wow, it's really cool. These people are capable, even Albert, especially with him being a person of color in this time, him still being very capable. He could have pulled that trigger, you
Oh yeah.
know?
Yeah.
He definitely could have done it and he could have finished the job in that moment, but he chose not to and take the high road, right? So that speaks on him and his character, right? And that was just so very interesting also with the conversations that were had about his backstory and about where he could potentially go, throughout the arc of a season or multiple seasons, right? Like, you know, you never know where it can go, and I think there's just so much more to explore, I believe, in the show, especially with like the abandons and who they are and the relationship that they have with one another. But yeah, I mean, it was the pilot and also the potential and also the backstory and just how transcendent it felt to me because I personally haven't seen a character quite like him exist
Hmm.
really, I'm not sure if I have, just with his specific backstory, with his specific positioning in this time, within this family, yeah, it was a very unique, idea to me.
And I was going to say, not just within the family, but his positioning ultimately within the community when they give him a
Yeah.
role of being a teacher. Because that,
Teacher.
to me, that
Exactly.
I will say, I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah.
To have a free black man teaching a bunch of little white kids whose
Right.
parents are not happy about it.
Yeah, but I mean, you see that though, right? Like you see that there is a father that comes in and has,
Hmm.
says something about it because these things exist, and I'm happy that that's even still there because these things would have happened. These would, so I'm really happy that there's at least there was that level of honesty that was there for the specific period in time.
So that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about because I agree with you. I think it's very honest that how the reaction would have gone.
Yeah.
I say this all the time on the podcast. People who listen know this. I'm a very cynical person.
Mhm.
So when Gillian Anderson's character comes in and is like, "You're going to be the teacher," I thought she was setting him up to fail.
To
I thought she was
fail.
setting him up to be like murdered. I thought it was
Right.
like bad intentions. It doesn't go that way in the story,
Yeah.
thankfully, because so many other things are going on. I'm not to, who's to say that it can't later, but currently it doesn't go that way. But I'm curious if that was something that you guys discussed when you were working on that scene in terms of the motivation for her, the motivation for Albert accepting the job. Does he
Yeah.
trust her? I mean, like, there has to be so much trust within his own family, but they've been
Yeah.
so at odds with this other family that it felt to me like, oh, this could go sideways real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I mean, we were getting episodes per time, like we were getting just the episode that we were shooting in the moment. So we didn't have the full scope and arc of the full show. But when that came up on the episode, I think it was it 4, I believe. I think it's episode 4,
Yeah.
maybe. But reading episode 4 and getting episode 4 is like, "Oh, wow. Okay, this is interesting. I think this can go many ways, right? This can go so many different ways, like what you said. Maybe she's setting him up to fail, or maybe she's trying to use him for, a plethora of reasons, like I mean, because I mean, she has this plan to take the land, and Albert could have been a pawn in her overall scale. There's so many different things that could have happened with that. So I think just ultimately, I think for us, we were challenge and you know what beautifully, especially as a performer, to just be present and
Mm.
without knowing what is to come, what is to happen, because scripts were being written like literally as we were shooting. So it was really hard for us to kind of, I guess, understand and create a full
Yeah.
seasonal arc, but it required us to just be extremely present and whatever's on the page, try and do as much service as we possibly can with the material. And yeah, but it was interesting. I mean, shooting that and also just having the scene with Jillian and just having that potential, I think really allowed me to sort of yeah, just bring whatever I did in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that that like necessity of being present is true all the way through, even for the bonds that your character has with his family, like the other orphans,
Yeah.
Lena's character? And the reason I'm asking is also because they keep the secret for so long of like
Yeah.
what they really, or what Lena's character really did to
Yeah.
that guy. And so to me, again, coming from a cynical world, like you never want to commit a crime with someone else because who knows that they won't turn on you. But it
Yeah.
felt like that was never going to be an issue here, and I'm curious where that came from.
What do you mean, like within the
In terms of
family?
the level of trust, if like
Yeah.
in your
Yeah. I mean, at the
mind, was
level,
it that they just like went through so much together that they had just already earned each other's trust, or like I guess where what you used as the
I
basis
think,
for like I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid
yeah.
this is going to fall down on me.
Yeah, I think the level of trust was there just because of the understanding of the disdain that everyone
Mm.
had for Constance, you know? Even though, I mean, at the end, yeah, I mean, I don't want to give too much spoilers, but
Well,
yeah, yeah,
it's I've
there
already
was,
warned everybody. It's
yeah, yeah,
out. It's
okay,
their
yeah.
problem.
So, I mean, there was a betrayal, there still was a betrayal that is present, you know what I'm saying? But, Yeah, I think everyone collectively felt like they can hold this secret. I mean, for the abandoned simply because
Yeah,
of what they did to our sister, you know? Like I wasn't gonna tell anyone, you know? I mean, I was a part, like not necessarily a part of it, but I was there, you know? Like I was witness to everything
right.
that happened. So I knew exactly what happened, you know, but I wasn't gonna say anything, you know? Look at what he did to my sister. I almost killed him. I
Yeah.
almost shot him myself. I almost did that myself. So, I definitely wasn't gonna say anything. You know, I trusted that no one else in the family would have said anything. You know, I don't know if we knew that it was Lena who ultimately killed him. We thought that maybe he just ended
Oh,
up dying
sure.
from wounds and things like that, or whatever it is. Like, we just knew that he is dead. You know, I don't know if they shared that with us. But still, I don't think they needed to in order for us to really kind of, be there
Hmm.
and hold firm in that, I guess, secret.
Yeah, I mean, but that to me is a really almost important piece of knowledge. If your characters don't know that Lena's character is the one that ultimately ended him, they all may feel a little bit more guilt because they all may have said, like you just said, oh, he just bled out and died.
Right.
And so, like, we all were a part of this because we didn't do anything about it. But no,
Hmm.
she took further action. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that to me is, I mean, I'm not saying any of the characters should have felt guilt because it's
Yeah.
ultimately in self-defense, in defense of your sister, as you said.
Right.
But that to me is, it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of how even within that family, maybe there were more secrets kept than I thought there were.
Absolutely, and I think personally, like there's so much more to explore there, and especially with at the ending and the way that it ended with this cliffhanger, it's like what's gonna happen,
Right.
right? What happens next? So I think there's a lot of room for us to now sort of instead of it being this outward thing and us trying to kind of protect ourselves, now it's gonna have to be turned back onto us and how we're gonna deal with everything that just kind of transpired and how we just blew everything. Like, are we able to even stay in Angel's Ridge after all that's
Right.
happened? Are we on the run? Are we going somewhere else? And when we're on the run, especially with me
Mhm.
being a free black man, look at all that my father has had to do. Now I'm a fugitive.
Yes. And also
I'm
I
an
mean, you're
accessory to a
free, but there's
crime.
still places you can't really go because there are people that don't care that you're free. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but I think the conversation, like, there's so many conversations that can be had, especially with like what you're saying, like the guilt. I'm sure that after everything that's happened, there are people that feel
yeah.
guilty, and maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have done that because now we're in this place. And, I'm sure there's a lot of conversations to be had. I'm sure people have things to say and things to share, because I do think that, for a lot of us, it was fight or flight, really.
Mm,
We had someone that was encroaching and endangering us and our livelihood, right? So I don't think there was also even just like the time to have to sort of unpack all of these things that are happening that are transpiring in the current present moment. You don't really have that sort of reflection moment where you can be like, you know what? I actually don't feel this
mm,
way. When at the same time, there are people that are trying to, like
yeah.
there's a lot going on. So I do think that there's a lot of potential for the introspection to happen, right? Yeah.
And though, I mean, I'm not going to ask you because I know you don't know or wouldn't say, even if you did, who survived, who's walking out of that house. But
I don't know.
I
I
do
don't
want to ask
know.
you if you've thought about which would make the more interesting story in your opinion.
Mhm.
Which woman would survive to make the second season? Maybe
Ah.
interesting is not the right word, but more
Hmm.
complicated, more
Yeah.
dramatic,
Might
more
have to
fun for you to film.
might have to get into the writing room and pitch some stuff. But that's an interesting question. I think it can go either way. And I think it'd be interesting either way, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You know, um I'll give you what I think potentially both ways could be,
Hmm.
right? I think if it's Jillian, if it's Constance that survives, I think it gives us motivation to it can get even darker. Now, if Lena survives, I think that it'll still be challenging because Lucas is present,
True.
right? Garrett.
True.
I'm sure he's gonna want to avenge his mother.
But it feels like the power would shift dynamically.
Sure, but it doesn't
And
mean
in a
that.
way, that to me is what, especially what Kurt Sutter does a lot very well.
Mhm.
So, and
Yeah,
I know that he left at a certain point in filming. So who's to
yeah.
say what might happen if he comes back for season two or not? But to me, that power dynamic switching, I think would be very fun to play out.
Yeah, I mean, I think both ways are interesting and it motivates all of us in some way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
right? I think if you have that, then you can actually have like a really good seasonal arc because there's actual real motivations coming from the characters and real tangible things that we can now actually attack and have to motivate us, and it also gives us an opportunity to really share a lot more of who we are and our backstory and where we come from, the connection that we have collectively, between one another, and the relationships that we have, with Mam, with
Mhm.
Lena, and with the siblings, and with I think there's so much to explore there, and yeah, it could be very, very interesting.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about actually filming this show because
Yeah,
you mentioned horses earlier, which already is complicated. You filmed in Calgary, right? So I'm assuming it was not the best weather. Uh, but there are some very
yeah,
beautiful backdrops, and I don't know,
right,
what is on a set with green screen and what isn't.
yeah,
Can you tell
yeah.
us a little bit about, for you, the majority of your stuff, where were you filming? Did you get to be out in the actual landscape a lot? And what was that? What did that do for you stepping into the time period and the character?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily for us, most of the shoot was on location.
Okay.
So we were actually so we shot a lot of it in Kananaskis, and
Oh.
it's a little it's like a town, I get not really a town, but it's an area in Calgary. And it's we shot on native reserve land. So there was no telephone wires, no telephone poles in the vista. You see the Rocky Mountains. It was absolutely stunning. Stunning, stunning. So the fact that we got to shoot there and that's where we got to sort of, exist and play for like 6, 7 months was incredible. They also built the entire town. There were alleyways, there were actually functioning bars and storefronts
Mm.
and things like that that had second floors, and they built all of it. Everything was built, and most of like m almost everything was practical. Almost everything was practical in the show, which is incredible. We shot on sound stages, but only for the interiors, like
Mhm.
for the inside of our homes.
Right.
Um, Other than that, everything else was practical. So it was amazing to just like, really immerse ourselves in that environment.
And was this one of those sets where they were like truly immerse yourself, like leave your phones in the trailer, like don't be on your phones in between setups? Like, does that
No, I don't
help or
think I don't
hinder?
no no the rules weren't that
Okay.
strict, but I think just depending on what you need as a performer, right? As a performer, if what you need is to leave your phone in the trailer and come to set and be completely present, then there's space for that, absolutely. Or if you want to just come to set, sit down on your chair and just be on your phone,
Mm.
and like there's also space for that. I think it's a very fluid and just open set, and everyone enjoyed themselves, had a really great time. A lot of us got very good at backgammon. Yeah, it was like honestly, the cast was absolutely incredible, and I'm really, really happy to have worked with just such great people in general.
And
Yeah.
this, I mean, this is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is one of these rare shows now where like this stemmed from Kurt's brain. This was not
Yes.
based on anything that
Yes.
already existed in the world. And I know that that means a lot to you, like original storytelling, original
Yes.
intellectual property. Tell me
Yes.
a litlittle bit about why that is, because you've done some work with source material being adapted that
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
been
Of course.
very fruitful and very
Of
great work.
course.
So
Of course.
what is making the difference for you right now?
Well, I think also where it stems from is just also me being motivated to want to tell my own stories as well. And a lot of the times, for me, I'm like, okay, cool. Adaptions and sequels and prequels and things like that are great as well. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the script. If the script is great, then I believe that it has the opportunity to be fantastic. You know, because it starts with the script. So regardless if it's like a an IP that they're bringing back or
Right.
whatever it is, right? If they have a really great script, it's a great story. But I think I've been moved recently, at least talking about in the present moment. I've really been moved by original ideas and original IP that comes out that creates such a big impact. You know, I think for me, Sinners was a very, very
Mm,
big thing this year that I experienced. I was like, wow, this blending of genre, how original this
yeah.
is, you know. Also, even Weapons, Zach Kreger, Weapons was also fantastic, like, and, I'm just really moved by, these original ideas because a lot of the times in Hollywood, we're not really seeing that too much, or, these studios or production companies aren't necessarily taking chances on a lot of original ideas. So when they come out and they create an impact, it means a lot. So when I met with Kurt and knowing that this was an original idea, this was something that he created, it didn't exist, there weren't anything that we can pull from aside from just actual history.
Hmm.
There's a lot, there's an extensive amount of research that we did on the period and on the times and what it was like being a black a free person of color in this time specifically and what that would look like. It was very, very intriguing to me. And yeah, if I have an opportunity to be able to be a part of something original, especially coming from the writer or director or the storyteller, and kind of being a vessel to be able to tell that story and bring it to life is amazing because I can only imagine what it feels like for the creator to
Mm,
be able to see the final
yeah.
product and see his vision or her vision on screen. Like it must be so rewarding because that's a reality that I want for myself. And I'm sure it'd be extremely, extremely gratifying.
To go back a second to talk about that research you and Kurt were doing, what were you relying on? Because it does feel like so much of that history, the true history, is
Yeah,
lost. Like
yeah,
we all talk about it all the time about, it's written by the victor. And so
right.
maybe there's not a lot of
Yeah,
stories
yeah, yeah,
about
yep,
maybe those victors weren't happy that these black
yeah,
men were free. And so maybe they didn't
yeah.
talk about them. So what were you able to use, I guess, for yourself?
Uh, yeah, there was an extensive amount of research that we did, and as I said, episodes were sort of just like
Right.
coming as we were shooting. So it wasn't like I had the opportunity to see the full arc of the character, the full arc of the show, and know how involved or how much of that research is actually going to be used and positioned to create a meaningful arc for
Mhm.
this character. Um, so yeah, I mean, just trust and faith, I guess, was sort of just what I was sort of leaning on to, and also just my own personal research and just being a professional, really.
But I
You know?
mean that, like in your research, there's no way you found, I can't imagine that you were able to find one guy who was second generation free man,
No,
became a teacher and
no.
like that had to be just what you were saying, trust and faith.
Yeah,
It would
just
be
trust and
realistic.
faith and yeah, exactly. Trust and faith and obviously, reading up on just the times and
Mm,
not a specific person, but more so a specific time and period and sort of just what it felt like. And based on my understanding of what it might have felt like,
hmm.
then, I can kind of, use my own imagination based on script, based on, dynamics, based on relationships, based on, just many different things that I can kind of use and make a choice as to how I'm going to sort of navigate this world of the show.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And
Mhm.
some of the other sh films that you were just talking about, like as new things that you're excited by, they both come from arguably the horror genre. Like Sinners, yes,
Yeah,
it's blending
yeah, yeah, yeah,
genres, but like
yeah,
once you know there are vampires, it's like, okay, we've
yeah.
crossed we've crossed into horror. Is that something that's specific right now that you're looking into horror for yourself, or was that just like a coincidence that the two
I
examples you
think,
gave?
yeah, I think it's just a coincidence. Also, the film Magazine Dreams also spoke
Okay.
to me as well. That was also an amazing film. Elijah Bynum was the writer director of that movie. That was also really, really a great film, I feel, and that wasn't necessarily horror, but it was more thriller. So maybe that's speaking to me right now, or at least the things that I'm digesting that sort of are moving me or saying something. And I think the reason why is because let's say Sinners, both Sinners and Weapons, they were able to cross genre. It
Hmm.
wasn't just horror. There are elements of horror that sort of, I guess, then categorizes it
Yeah.
as horror, right? But there was, especially in Weapons, like there were elements of comedy that were in there and the moments that made me laugh,
Yeah.
and I really love just the freedom that a lot of the creators are feeling. I mean, I think even like with Jordan Peele and what he did with like Get Out, like even that was very, very cool and really, really great, just creating event films that people can go to and really sit down and watch and have an experience,
Hmm.
I think is really cool.
It seems like from everything that you're saying, like there's a lot of respect for the people who are writing these projects, directing these projects. Is that something you have your eye on to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm currently developing now, with the ambition to want to get behind the camera and tell my own stories. As an actor, it's amazing that you get to, be a vessel to someone else's story and tell someone else's story and bring someone else's story to come to and bring that to life. For instance, like with the Abandons, sitting down with Kurt and sort of sitting down and sort of having that conversation with him about what his idea is
Right.
and me being the vessel to be able to bring that to life. I think now to kind of flip that on its head and me be able to say, hey, you know what, I have this idea and I want to now be able to bring my idea to life. I can only imagine that being extremely rewarding and gratifying and something that really would just feed me as an artist and as a creative, and I never want to limit myself to, just one thing, I think, creativity, you can extend that to so many different mediums and so many different ways of telling, and I'm really excited to sort of just tap into different creative aspects of myself.
It also kind of feels like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it kind of feels like your story is unique enough to tell in a film or a TV show because like going from being so young as a dancer, getting professional work, traveling this road successfully as an artist, it feels like there's probably a lot of things, lessons you've learned, inspiration you've
Yeah.
had that you could draw on. Is that something that you actually are looking into doing? Or do you feel like, well, when I say I want to
Um,
tell an original story, like it has to come from an idea, not my personal story?
I think all the above. I think all the above, I think I don't want to limit myself to the kinds of stories that I want to tell, but I think it's very smart to be able to use my background and the things that I've experienced and have
Yeah,
gone through in order for me to pull from real life experience and then tell a story that, is pulled from these experiences. It doesn't have to be like my it doesn't have to be like my biopic or anything like
right.
that, but it can be an experience that maybe I can pull from something that I personally experienced before. Yeah, I'm exploring so many different ideas and concepts and things. I think I'm in a space of just the process. I'm just trying to learn. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to just like sharpen my craft of storytelling, writing.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall. I'm expounding on a couple things that I find are interesting, maybe putting other things in my pocket, just I'm just sort of actively working on that aspect of my storytelling in this current moment while also just kind of, locking in and wanting to sort of chart a very intentional and meaningful career
Sure.
for myself on the acting side.
Which, I mean, listen, everybody I talk to, whenever I ask those questions in terms of like trying to draw through lines through the projects you take or whatever the case may be, a lot of times I hear back, oh, we can't do that. Like, we just have to take the work that is handed to us because, like, we need to eat. I don't hear it in those
Yeah.
words, but I do hear it in, like, I wish I was in
Understood.
a position to be a little bit,
Yeah.
whatever. So I guess I do want to turn that question to you, like as you are looking at this a little bit more holistically, because you are also creating now, and I would assume creating for yourself. What does that do for the projects that you're willing to entertain that are coming from somebody else? Are there things that you are saying absolutely no to because maybe they're too similar to something you've done before or just
Yeah.
not the right, next step?
Yeah.
Not to get all punny about your
Yeah.
previous
Yeah,
role,
yeah,
but
no, no. All just like really great questions, honestly. I think I think for me, all of what you said and sort of, not wanting to do a project for X, Y, and Z or wanting to sort of direct myself to, it's all a part of me being intentional, right? And me just kind of wanting to have a vision for where I want to go and make sure that everything that I'm doing aligns with that vision, and especially because I am creating, I'm able to create because again, as an actor, you kind of have to wait for it to be real
Yes.
in order for you to get the job to be able to tell that story. Whereas when I'm creating, I can sort of create the thing that maybe doesn't exist, that maybe I want, maybe for myself, or something that I think that someone else may want, you know? So I can attack it from a different lens. Whereas for an actor, I think the things that I'm looking at, and a lot of times people ask me, oh, like, what are you looking for your next project? Or what are the things that you look for? I don't think there's anything specific that I'm looking for. I think it's just in the writing, in the
Mm.
script. How does it make me feel? What's the story, of course, but how does that story make me feel? And I think through that is where a lot of my decisions are made. I want to feel connected to the material. I want to know, and do I get a little nervous about the prospect of playing this character? That's interesting to me, right? Because I get to challenge myself that way.
Yeah.
And through challenges, I'm gonna grow as an artist and as a performer, I want to work with people that could challenge me, that could make me like, do my homework and come to set and not only show up, but also arrive, in a really meaningful way. And I think that's just the headspace that I'm in this current moment.
No, everything you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. And it also, I'm going to be totally honest with you, makes me kind of reevaluate how I saw one of your previous projects. Because after you went from Your Honor to The Last of Us, I was like, oh, The Last of Us seems like such a small role for you to take. But then hearing you talk about all the things you talked about, and obviously seeing the role as well, it was such a meaningful
Yeah.
role. It made sense. But it made more sense hearing the way that you just described things that you're looking for in terms of the
Yeah.
writing and maybe even the challenging of like having to do some ASL with the kid
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
brother and like
Yeah.
just that I don't feel like we've seen characters like that a lot, if at all. I mean,
Yeah.
forget the post-apocalyptic aspect of the
Right.
show, just
Right.
like these two kids of color who are communicating silently with each other and they're all they have
Right.
and like it's such a
Right.
it's such
Yeah.
a special bond. But
Yeah.
I will say that when I first heard about it, I was like, huh, because I didn't know the game and I knew
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be a season-long arc. And I was like,
Right.
oh, so it does what I'm trying to say, and I'm not articulating it well, is that like it does seem like the intention that you're setting is working in a way that like for someone like me who is so cynical needs to hear you explain to like
Yeah.
fully see it. Like obviously
Yeah.
it was a great role, Emmy nomination, so deserved, but I don't know that I would have thought that just seeing it on
Like that would have been the organic step. Like for,
yeah, just seeing it on
yeah.
paper. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't really know what's next for me. I just know what comes to me, right? And the things that I read. And for me, yeah, just the way that I read, and especially, I was familiar with the games and I knew how
Okay.
popular the games were. So getting that audition, I was like, oh, interesting. HBO? Okay, cool. And then obviously I read it and Craig Mazin, like
Yeah.
just all the components of the show, it made me be like, okay, you know what? This is definitely something that I will throw my hat into. I sent a tape, and when I tell you, maybe about 2 days later, I got the call that I booked it. I was on a flight, So some things just kind of happen, um, that are sort of it just kind of I guess it just kind of was meant to happen,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful for that experience and that opportunity, truly. The Last of Us was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And yeah, I mean, I'll carry that with me. But yeah, moving forward, yeah, I just definitely want to continue to yeah, just be intentional, and try and transcend
Yeah.
with my work. And even with the draw to the abandons was that the same kind of sentiment, it's like, okay, this character that I haven't really seen on TV or film, him being a second generation free black man, he's educated, he exists in this world, this kind of family of like outsiders, just kind of, you know, these yeah, it was very interesting. And the pitch to me was very, very interesting, and the prospect and the potential of it all just felt really, really great to me.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, I'm gonna just have to tie this back one more time to the beginning of the conversation. Do you feel like there's anything from the dance world that, I mean, you mentioned like the horseback riding, and I said earlier like it was that was something more physical than I had thought of initially, but like anything from the dance world that has helped you find the character not in a physical way, more maybe in, I don't know, maybe in the community or the
Hmm.
expression, or is that something that you're still able to draw on in your roles today?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever had to actually think about that. But
And I don't mean just for Albert, like if somebody else comes to
yeah.
mind, please
Yeah,
let
yeah,
me know
yeah,
about it. But
absolutely. You know, I think I mean dance really influences a lot of the physicality
sure.
of my characters, absolutely. But I think I mean, like dance really just informs really everything because that was sort of my foundational sort of my foundational step, you know, for me to get to where I am, you know. So through the performance, and when you're dancing, you're still telling stories. You're just telling stories in a different way. You know, you still have to convey something and make the audience feel something through the movement and through your expression of movement, right? So I think I think yeah, maybe that just expression,
Mm,
you know. And body language, I think. But that's a
mm.
physicality, you know. But I think there's a lot of, you know, yeah, but it can be even subtle things, you know, that I can maybe pull from dance and what, yeah, informs a lot of my performance.
I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, body
I think,
language is something that I was thinking of, less so the physical, like way somebody maybe walks in the world, but more of
right.
just like if I'm just looking at you in like this type of frame, right? Like
Yeah.
medium shot, there's still something in there that dance can inform, and you're not moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's where
Absolutely.
I again was not articulating it right, but like that's where my brain was kind of thinking of like there's got to be something that maybe it's not even conscious at this point because
Mhm.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
so a
maybe
part of
not.
you.
Yeah, right, right. Maybe not, you know, because dance, you know, it will always be a part of me. And I think for me also, you know, yeah, you know, I would love to revisit dance in some way, shape, or form. You know, I'm not sure what that looks like. You know, whether it's a role or whether it's, you know, I don't know, but I would love to revisit it in some way, shape, or form, and to be able to sort of express myself through that again. But if I'm able to sort of elevate it and sort of marry it to the kind of work that I'm doing in this moment, I think that could be really beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
All right, I'm going to ask you something that I don't know, this may stump you because it's been a long time, but the Next Step YouTube page still has a lot of your dances, like a lot of the like learn with me style.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
there one that you would point to as like, oh man, I want everyone to learn this. Check this one out. This was so much fun to do, or like so
Ah.
hard to do. I know.
Yeah, it's been so long.
I know.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the specific like dance steps, but I mean I think you can check out really any of them. You know, I think any of them are sort of like friendly enough for you to be able to follow and
Oh no,
catch.
I guess I just meant
Um,
from you from like a personal standpoint, something that was really
Oh, I think
meaningful.
one thing that I used to that I found myself watching back after the whole the next step was there was a freestyle competition that we did. I think it was called like Bangers and Mashup on the show or something like that. And there's these little freestyle clips that that are on YouTube that I think were really, really cool because it allowed me to sort of just be in my element of freestyle because that's where I started dancing. I started dancing like, you know, like you play a song and I can dance to it. Even if I've never heard this song ever before, I can still dance to it because I can catch the
Right.
syncopation, I can catch the rhythm, I can catch the beat and understand where the certain pockets are that I have to live. And again, it allows me, oh, okay, see here, through dance, you have to be present when you're
Yeah,
moving and when you're freestyling. So presence, I think I pull from dance and I kind of, I guess, use that in my current craft of acting. So to answer your question,
makes
I'll
sense.
probably say being present because when you're freestyling, say if it's to a song you've never heard before, you have to be extremely present and active to be able to move, but not only move, but listen
Yeah.
simultaneously on in a split second. So there's also a lot of skill that comes from having to do that. So it was a lot of fun to be able to sort of just like freestyle and just have some fun.
Yeah, and I was gonna say even just like reacting, like whether you're reacting
Yeah,
to someone you're dancing with or a scene
right,
partner you're acting with,
right,
like that to me,
right.
I think is what throws so many people off. Like they go
Absolutely.
in with what they think exactly is going to
Right.
happen, and then
Yeah.
a little thing changes and they
And it throws them off
freeze. Yeah,
because they don't have the presence. They're not present in the moment and listening because if you're actively listening, then if someone says something else or whatever it is, if
right.
you're actively listening and receiving what it is that they're saying, then you can actively like naturally in an organic way rebuttal back in whichever way, whether you're getting back on script or whether you're just kind of going
Yeah,
off script and ad-libbing a little bit in order for you to find it again, right? It's just about being active, I think, and listening. A lot of times
well,
actors don't tend to like listen because like what you're saying, it's rehearsed. So it's like I say this thing, you say this thing, I say this thing, you say
right.
this thing, you know, as opposed to me saying this thing, you saying this thing, but maybe in this moment when you say it to me, maybe you crack up and you tear up a little bit. Maybe it takes me a moment for me to receive that.
Right.
Like it's about again just being present.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not just speeding through the scene. I will say I don't think it's just actors you said about listening. I was like, it's everybody. Everybody needs to listen.
Yeah. 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 Everybody needs to listen.
Like even
Exactly.
in a
Exactly.
conversation, like,
Right.
we're not just it's not supposed to be one-sided, but there will
Right.
be times where someone's like, "Well, I just have a point to make." It's like, "Cool, but then talk
Yeah.
to the mirror." I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it also explains a lot about, a lot of the work that you've gotten to do and like the reason that you're in these really dramatic emotional performances because you're able to do that and you're able to like work off of whoever is in front of you and give it
Yeah.
back and raise the bar. So I
Yeah.
really want to thank you for coming on. That I
Yeah, of
think you've raised
course.
the bar here too.
Yeah, no, of course. No, my pleasure. I really appreciate, the time and asking some very thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, hopefully, fingers crossed for season two of The Abandoned,
Yeah,
because I mean, beyond wanting to know who survived that fire, I mean, I really do think like the storyline that left me with the most, I think, even spin-off potential is yours. Of just like, there's so much.
amazing.
And I was saying lineage earlier, meaning like, not just your, I wasn't even thinking, oh, there's so much to tell about the relationships you have with your adoptive family, but like,
Right.
who you came from and
Yeah,
flashing
right. Yeah,
back
exactly.
and like
Yeah,
what was that struggle and that journey,
right.
that to me is so interesting. So not that
Yeah.
that's what they're going to do, but just there's a lot of potential
Yeah,
there.
yeah, there's a lot of potential there. Yeah, and I do appreciate that. Like there is that potential and there is so much more to explore. And yeah, that's what keeps me actually really yeah, I'm in full gratitude in this moment. And yeah, I do hope that, there is a potential to come back for another season because then we can really explore a lot of the things that we spoke
Right.
about. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Before you scatter to your next thing, let me tell you where to find what we discussed on today's episode of Made Possible by Pop Culture. First, The Abandons. That's Lamar's latest show. Obviously, we talked about it a lot. I already said it's streaming now on Netflix, but I'm going to say it again in case you missed it. 7 episodes. Go get it now on Netflix. The 2003 film Honey is streaming on Apple TV. The Next Step, the dance series that Lamar was a part of, they have an official YouTube channel where you can watch a variety of clips. And let me be clear, please watch the official channel. Please don't go looking for anything illegally uploaded. Don't get me in trouble. Lamar talked about a couple of recent films from the year that he has been particularly inspired by, and those are Sinners and Weapons, which are both available on HBO Max, and Magazine Dreams, which, as of now, the time of this recording, is not yet available to stream, but you can rent it on Apple TV or Prime Video. And I do want to throw in a mention of The Last of Us. Lamar was Emmy nominated for his role in season one. That is available on HBO Max. So this has been made possible by Pop Culture, the podcast. And once again, I want to thank you all for joining me. And please come back next week when we will be doing my annual Christmas episode. Again, apologies to those who don't celebrate Christmas, but I think this one's going to be really fun.